Kids. Taking care of kids. It's a timeless and essential task, and it's at the heart of one of the most pressing conversations in the U.S. right now.
Even as Congress and the White House debate what should be done next, one challenge remains a constant for parents, and that is childcare.
Those families, many of essential workers, had nowhere to send their children.
No one should have to choose between a job and a paycheck, or taking care of themselves and their loved ones, or parent or spouse or child.
Right now, the U.S. is at a pretty big turning point when it comes to the future of childcare in this country. And for me, this is a decision that hits pretty close to home. For the past year, here's what my life has been like.
Want some more?
For 4 days a week, I've had to juggle a full-time job with raising an 18-month-old who started this pandemic as a 4-month-old. And as he's gotten bigger and more mobile, things have gotten harder. There have been plenty of Zoom bombs. There were missed nap times, which means more hours of work to offset during weird hours when he is asleep. There were times where I just knew my performance wasn't what it would be otherwise. Lots of divided attention. Now, for the most part, I think we've been some of the lucky ones. I have a fairly flexible job where if I need to do some of my work during strange hours of the day, I can. I have a mom who lives in town. She can come over a couple times a week to help out. But by and large, what we've been doing the past year has not been sustainable. So the most high-stakes time of the day is easily nap time. In an hour or an hour and a half long nap, I can get done 3 to 4 times what I used to be able to do in an hour. It's just what happens when time is that precious of a commodity. Lately, now that we've both been vaccinated and we see case rates going down and our kids getting older, we're actually looking into the option of daycare. Daycare used to be something I never thought about, but after realizing how helpful and beneficial the structure and the social opportunities can be, we're ready for it. Let me tell you, it is expensive. Here's one called Science-ing. They start at 16 months, and the rate is $1,300 a month. We've got one called Ridge City. This one is ran by a church. Sometimes that makes things cheaper, but not always. Let's see here. $16.25 a month. Here's one ran by the university, San Diego State. It's not too far from where we live. So the price does go down the older your kids get. The reason for that is that older kids need less constant monitoring, and so you can have larger teacher-to-child ratios. But still, you often hear about how expensive college is, and I went to both a 4-year university and then grad school, so yeah, I agree, it is not cheap. My wife and I only recently paid off our loans, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and that was with trying to knock them out as soon as possible. We know so many people who are going to be paying off their loans for a long time. But with that said, you don't often hear about how much preschool, daycare, infant care, these things cost. And here's how the two compare. So knowing their monthly price, the San Diego State University preschool will cost just under $19,000 for a full year. Now looking here, tuition for a college student at SDSU over 1 year is $8,136. Now that doesn't include housing costs, but neither does preschool really, because my kid is still going to be living here. Okay, so San Diego is a really expensive place to live. What about somewhere cheaper? Okay, at the University of Texas's preschool, they have tuition prices depend on income. I'm guessing ours would be lower than it is here if we were adjusted for a Texas rate, but I'm just gonna pick the middle option here. That ends up being $1,070 a month over a year, almost $13,000. Now, if I was a student, a Texas resident paying for the most amount of hours possible, that's still gonna put me at $11,400. Yeah, that's still cheaper. I tried one more time with Louisiana State University, that's in Baton Rouge, much more affordable than San Diego. $12,220 for preschool, $11,962 for college students. Preschool is still more expensive. Now, I also think college is too expensive, so that I'm not holding that up as a model of what we want here. But at least, even as expensive as college is, I have 18 years to kind of save up for that, you know? And not only that, but 18 years from now, hopefully my income potential is going to be higher than what it is right now. Also, if I wanted to save up for college, the best time to do that is actually right now, where I still have years and years for that money to compound and accumulate in things. So the cost of preschool is really going to make that less possible. And of course, there's one other big thing that happens when preschool-aged children just don't have anywhere to go, and it's that parents can't work.
Tara Riley was given a leave from her cancer research job to watch her kids. She was called back this month, told she had to return to the office from 8 to 5. Her response?
I will work 40 hours a week or more, but I can't be committed to being in front of a computer from 8 to 5. And they said, we will accept this email as your voluntary resignation. And that was that.
Now, it's probably easy to think of the pandemic as the start of all this, but really it's been going on and it's been building up for much longer than that. Now, since I was a kid in the 1990s, the cost of childcare has pretty much tripled, and that is much faster than the rate of inflation over that time. And if you try to look at some of these numbers in more detail, you'll find that these estimates are actually pretty generous. So in California, the average cost of childcare is just under $17,000 a year. The median household income is just over $75,000. So half of families spend 15% of their yearly income or more on childcare. And this is at a time when families are having fewer and fewer children. Then, of course, you have the pandemic. Everyone starts working from home. Suddenly, office spaces and playrooms overlap, and chaos ensues.
Yes.
The question is, how do democracies respond to those scandals?
I think one of your children has just walked in.
That's gonna be a funny video.
Suddenly, everyone's working from home. People don't feel safe having their kids in a daycare setting exposed to other kids while a highly contagious disease goes around. So they pull them out. This makes sense. But now the daycare centers are losing revenue. They're having to let go of staff. Many are closing their doors and going out of business.
All the parents were quarantining. Some of them lost their jobs. So we went from having about 28 kids to right now we only have 7.
For those parents who pulled their kids out, they know this isn't a situation that can last for forever. They're in this totally unsustainable situation of having to juggle jobs full-time and childcare. And let's not forget that there are many other parents who can't do this juggle. Think of nurses and medical workers, essential workers, as all these daycare places are closing and going out of business. They have fewer and fewer options for where to send their kids, let alone places where they feel safe doing so. And it's impossible to talk about all this without touching on who are the ones most affected: women.
But the pandemic continues to impact women at a higher rate. Analysts predict the road to financial recovery will be especially tough for women.
I do think a lot of the organizational and operational aspects of day-to-day life that this pandemic has made more challenging are falling disproportionately on women. And of course, single moms bear this doubly.
It's actually unique to this unemployment crisis that women have been the hardest hit.
In previous recessions, women tended to fare better than men.
People have looked at this trend and seen how it's undone years and years worth of hard-earned progress towards gender equity. So how do you fix this? Where do you find a solution? When I look at college tuition, sometimes I'll see things like the salaries of university presidents, or I'll just look at the fancy student centers that they're building on campus that are meant to attract more freshman applicants and thus more revenue. And to me, it'll seem like, okay, those are a few obvious places to start. It's not the same with daycares. You don't want to cut operating costs at a daycare. Daycare providers are already underpaid. When you cut their operating costs, what you're doing is you're losing skilled teachers. You are losing the ideal child to adult ratio and just packing everything in there. You're losing a safe environment and the attention that kids need. Okay, but if you can't cut those costs because that hurts the quality of childcare, and you also don't want to raise prices on parents because they can't afford it, then what do you do? Other countries have asked themselves this question. In France, the government pays for a crèche program that all kids are eligible for.
La crèche. This is the place where you can leave your baby, people can take care of it, while you have to go to work.
La crèche is considered the holy grail of daycare options in France.
A system of family allowances with tax incentives. It's called les allocations familiales.
They accept babies that are 2 months old to 3-year-old kids.
Scandinavian countries have a reputation for having things like this pretty figured out, and childcare is no exception.
The Swedish preschool system is incredible because it does mean that parents can actually go back to work and still live and have a livelihood, because the childcare, it's not free. I hate it when you see these headlines, oh, it's free in Sweden. It's not free. It's capped at about £100 a month, I think, or just over £100 a month, which is just incredible.
In the US, sometimes we have a penny pinching mentality when it comes to these things, so we wonder, okay, so how are we going to pay for all this? Is it higher taxes or whatnot? Look, you're reaping the rewards right away in the amount of the workforce you free up. Practically all other nations that have a similar income level to the United States have something in place where citizens are actively investing in their next generation, and at the same time, their current workforce's ability to do their jobs well. Even in lower income countries, there's still a cultural element of community care where different generations end up providing care for each other. Here's just an example, but when children are very young, oftentimes a grandparent will come in and help with the childcare, and that gives the parent more capacity to earn an income. Later, that grandparent ages and becomes the one in need of more care, which is when their children step up to provide it. This is often around the time when the youngest generation then starts their career or goes off to school. And this cycle continues as elders pass and as parents age and as new children are born. Honestly, I find this approach kind of beautiful. I grew up with my grandma in the house as my mom took care of her as she aged. She lived to be nearly 100, which meant by the time I was born, she was already in her 70s. And so that time we spent in the same household actually gave me the opportunity to really get to know one of my grandparents. She passed away a few years ago, and I am super thankful that our lives were like that for a period of time. A system like this relies on mutuality, and that means everybody has a role. But there are many cases where a person can't fulfill their role. Thinking of single parent households, or poverty that demands both parents work maybe multiple jobs. Oh, and then there's unexpected and untimely deaths. So then what happens? In the US, this is a breaking point for a lot of families. We have kind of an individualistic culture that influences our approach to childcare and elder care. A lot of that ends up happening in isolation. There's this separation that goes on between working generations and the vulnerable ones. And I don't mean this as a slight on anyone for whom an institution is just what works best. But what I am highlighting is the importance of finding some way in which we're looking out for each other and especially our most vulnerable. What I love most about that village family approach isn't so much its structure, it's more about the mindset. It's that we're all gonna have different periods of life where we have the capacity to give, and we're gonna have seasons of life where we're the ones in need, we're the ones who need to be taken care of. When that mindset is aligned with the problem-solving skills and innovation appropriate for each culture, some really good things can happen.
The government has capped monthly fees at $720 and offers subsidies. Children here are learning about Singapore's diversity. The country has 4 official languages: English, Mandarin, Tamil, and Malay. So playtime focuses on making a Malay dish, while story time and language lessons are in Mandarin.
Now, I said I think we're at a turning point when it comes to all of this, and here's why I think that's the case. We've experienced a monumental shift in everything. We're at a point in human history where we get to rethink the way things work. We're reimagining the concept of work. We're reimagining equity. And we can reimagine things like childcare and education as well. We have new leaders. We have so many people who are now thinking much more deeply about public policy after experiencing really intensely how those decisions affect their daily lives. We're also seeing a lot more ambition and creativity when it comes to plans and proposals.
Universal, high-quality childcare and early education for our littlest ones, available to every parent who wants it.
We're hearing these ideas and concerns be validated from a diversity of political perspectives.
Senator Mitt Romney wants to open the government coffers for kids. His Family Security Act would give parents $250 a month for their school-aged children and $350 a month for younger kids.
Some of the ideas that people are coming up with are really creative, but also actionable.
We need a plan for mothers because we are America's essential workers.
In an open letter published as a full-page ad in the Washington Post, the group of men, some of whom are fathers, called on Congress to pass the Marshall Plan for Moms that will get women back to work.
Sustained economic support is really only one part of this and one part of this issue. There are other parts that are also very important, like paid maternity leave, increasing sick days for mothers to take care of their children that are at home from school.
Outlined in the voters pamphlet, ballot measure 26214 promises high-quality tuition-free preschool for all children who are 3 and 4 years old, up to 6 hours per day.
And most of all, we have hordes of parents who are just ready to see something new happen. Here's what I hope happens. I hope that signs of cooperation we're starting to see from different political perspectives is for real. I know more often than not, bipartisanship can just look like a PR stunt, and often it is, but on this particular issue, there seems to be more widespread interest from surprising sources than I'm used to seeing. Speaking of political perspectives, though, I hope that this doesn't turn into a case of just saying, oh, well, what does my political philosophy say about this? What do people who I support, what do they say? Because that's my opinion too, you know? I hope we see it more as a collaborative opportunity to approach problem solving and take on a problem that is affecting the daily lives of millions and millions of families. Finally, I hope we remember that childcare isn't a new task, and this isn't a task that only happens in the US, and that means that people all across the world have thought of various different ways to meet these needs. I hope we keep an open mind to what others have done. I hope we take a look at systems that have worked elsewhere, the results that policies have produced, and consider what of those might work for us here. Thanks for watching this. Be kind to the parents of young ones you see out there, please. And I don't just mean kind as in get them a cup of coffee, although if you do that, that's much appreciated. But I mean, talk to people, contact legislators, add to the pressure that's out there for better systems to be built. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you around soon.